On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
Hello ladies and gentlemen. Any of you who watched the show a couple of weeks ago will remember that I was railing against the design of the new logo of the Royal Entomological Society, an organisation which I've always wanted to become a fellow of. I said, to my amusement, if not to anybody else's, that it looked a bit like a butt plug, and I much preferred the original logo, which looked like this. Not entirely to my surprise, along came Computer Boy, that's him there, or rather an artistic representation of him there, and he disagreed with me. So, Louis, why? What's wrong with it? Why do you like the logo? It looks awful.
Well, John, as I keep telling you, I disagree with you on a lot of things, but in this case they're completely right. And you're wrong. They've simplified their logo so that it looks good in different mediums that it can be expected to be used in today. Like on Twitter, like on Facebook, like on Instagram. It's also designed to, entice young people. See, kids nowadays, we don't need old-fashioned fancy logos. We want something that's clear and straight to the point. And it doesn't look like a butt plug. You just have a dirty mind, sir.
Off, Louis. I think this is another fine example of the intellectual cut and thrust of debate here at the Centre for Fortean Zoology.
I really like the old credits.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Saturday afternoon, and it's time for another episode of On the Track. And as you can see, I am here accompanied by my co-presenter, the lovely Lilith Tinkerbell, who actually probably talks more sense than I do. We're filming this again on a Saturday afternoon, just after having watched the episode that came out a couple of weeks ago, when you saw us continuing with our three-way debate, me, Richard and V, about our favourite Fortean movies. All sorts of things have happened in the last 3 weeks, but I'm afraid I've not been very well for a large chunk of it. So my big apologies to all of you who are hoping to be able to have the CFZ Yearbook for 2022-2023. By now it is finished, and a few days ago I sent it to Gwyn, the lovely Miss Guinevere in Exeter. She is just doing the final proofing to it, and as soon as she sends it back to me, I will be uploading it to the printers, and we will have copies in our sticky little fingers, and I will then be able to advertise it properly with a list of what's in it and everything. Something else that I want to address, which isn't worthy of a whole episode of itself, but I think we should talk about, is again referring to the controversy about the Gypsy moth being renamed the spongy moth, because it has been alleged that the word gypsy is particularly offensive to the Romany people. Now, as I said in the episode when we dealt with this story, I am allegedly a 16th Romany. At least my grandfather always claimed he was, quote, half gypsy, unquote, and that was the reason that he hadn't been promoted further than the flight lieutenant in the Royal Flying Corps during the First World War. My father always said that the reason he wasn't promoted higher was he was a bloody awful shot, but I wouldn't like to weigh in on either side of that argument. However, I discussed this story with somebody in the CFZ organisation who has a much higher quotient of Romany ancestry and indeed celebrates the fact. Our dear sweet housekeeper, the long-suffering Miss Sarah, and I told her the story, and she was absolutely appalled. She said it was complete nonsense, and that whilst there are quite a few words used for the Romany people in British colloquial culture, Gypsy wasn't one of the ones that they found offensive, and that people should really grow up and start dealing with the things that need to be dealt with, rather than picking fights with other people on the flimsiest pretexts of political correctness. And that is from one who knows. I'm filming this on the 21st of March, and today at least, the war in the Ukraine shows no sign of coming to an end. It is what we all thought was not going to happen in our lifetimes, a major war in Europe. And the very idea of it is horrifying. However, there is something quite interesting that comes out of wars. We all know how a war will change the geopolitical face of a region, but did you know that it can also change its natural history? When people talk about the Second World War in Europe, they often forget the fact that although mainland Britain was never successfully invaded, the Channel Islands, which are under British sovereignty, or sort of, I'll come back to that in a minute, were invaded by the Germans and were occupied for some years. There was even a concentration camp on the island of Alderney. Just to go back to that little trailing loose end I left just now, the Channel Islands are not part of the United Kingdom. They are the last remnants of the Duchy of Normandy, and although the Queen is, of course, the ruler of the Channel Islands, if you look at any stamps from the Channel Islands, she's not wearing a crown. That's because she is the Duke of Normandy, and she is ruling the Channel Islands in that guise. And notice, by the way, it's Duke of Normandy. She's not the Duchess of Normandy. The Duchess of Normandy would be the wife of the Duke of Normandy. No, the Queen, God bless her, is the Duke of Normandy. And that's just another one of those little rabbit holes I like to disappear down into once in a while. On to the main narrative, because I'm getting there, I promise you. No, stop. I know the story of the Queen, the missing crown, and the Duke of Normandy on the postage stamps because Karina and I were told this by our tour guide back in 2006 when we went to Jersey to pay homage to Gerald Durrell. However, today, when I have been looking for stamps to illustrate my story about the missing crown, I can't find any. They've all got the crown on them. Can anybody explain to me what happened to the stamps without the crown, and why all the stamps I can find now, even though I know damn well I have seen stamps without a crown, all the stamps I can find now have got her wearing a crown, and portray her father wearing a crown, and her great-grandmother wearing a crown. I haven't actually got as far as being able to find postage stamp from George V, but I guess he will probably still be wearing a crown. So what has happened? If any of you can tell me this, please, this is really beginning to bug me. So can you please let me know in the comments below? And now we're back to where we should have been some minutes ago before I got distracted. What, I'm sure you're going to be asking yourselves, has all this got to do with natural history, cryptozoology, or any of the other things with which we deal? Well, it's simple, quite a lot really, because during the occupation of Jersey by the German forces, petrol and oil were very, very short in supply, and so an awful lot more of the work that would normally have been done by tractors on the islands was done by horses. And then, as a result of this extra work for horses and the extra horses that had to be brought in to do this extra work, they had to bring in extra hay from France. And this is quite probably why, in 1946, a new species of butterfly for the British Isles was described from 3 small places on Jersey. The butterfly was this, the large checkered skipper, and it was always very rare on Jersey, but the 3 sites at which it had initially been found soon contracted to one small one on the north of the island. But what's this got to do with World War II, you ask? Well, it's simple. It's because the only logical explanation for how these butterflies turned up on Jersey in the middle of the war is that the eggs or larvae were almost certainly imported in the hay bales from France, which had been brought in to feed the extra horses. I'm sure that everybody, with the possible exception of Vladimir Putin, would agree with me when I say that the current events in the Ukraine are a humanitarian tragedy. But I cannot help wondering whether there will be some unforeseen zoological spin-offs from this horrible conflict, and that some animals from the East will have been inadvertently transported further into Europe. But that's not the only reason I've been thinking of this recently. Have a look at this. In the latest edition of the Butterfly Conservation magazine, there's an interesting article about a closely related butterfly, the checkered skipper, which has been very rare in the British Isles for some years. It's a long and rather interesting story. The large checkered skipper carried on in Jersey until it was finally declared extinct in 1996. However, the fate of the English populations of the checkered skipper are much more complicated. It was once found widely across the country, but became rarer and rarer and rarer, finally becoming extinct in England in 1975. However, back in 1939, when populations in England were already giving cause for concern to lepidopterists, totally by surprise, the checkered skipper was discovered living in Scotland. And these populations are both stable and self-sustaining. There have been attempts for many years to try to reintroduce the checkered skipper to England, to some of its previous haunts, but they've all been unsuccessful until now. Now, going back to the Butterfly Conservation article, for the first time it is revealing where the very secret reintroduction program has been being carried out for the last half-dozen years, and it now reveals that it's in a forest in Northampton. And so, if you butterfly enthusiasts watching this want to go out and have a look at them, you now know where to go and I'll just give you the exact details. It's to Forestry England's Fine Shade Wood in Northamptonshire, and I think Fine Shade Wood has got a charmingly Alison Utley type name to it, and it's exactly the place where a reintroduction of our once native but very charming butterfly could be taking place. Well done to everybody involved. Well, ladies and gentlemen, any of you who watched the last segment will probably have heard this little fellow barking frenetically in the background. He tells me it's because he's trying to access his inner wolf and trying to show everybody in the on the track viewership that he is actually a grey wolf. Well, it's true, he is part of a semi-domesticated subspecies of the grey wolf, but I don't think that that's really what Archie was barking about. It's because the people in the building site across the road have got a vehicle which goes beep, 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 and Archie doesn't like sounds of going beep, 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 because they make him cross. However, enough of that, but it is quite a useful introduction to this next segment. I think it was Richard Muirhead who sent me this story. As you all know, Carl, Geordie and the gang are working very hard doing stuff in the Forest of Dean, researching the sightings of lynx-sized big cats in the forest. But there does seem to be another creature that is being reported anyway from the Forest of Dean, and that is a wolf, which has been reported not just in the last week, but was reported about 8 months ago at the end of last year. Let me just go through the stories for you. The first sighting happened at about 9:15 on October the 26th, after the witness's sat-nav took her on an unusual detour on her way home. Rhea Seward, aged 29, from Sedbury, said, "I had been to play netball in Monmouth and I was following the sat-nav to get me home, but I didn't recognise the way it had been taking me that night. It was a very rural detour on the B4293 in Colford, and it was pitch black. I had my full beam lights on, and the wolf saw me before I saw it. It was literally 10 feet away from me. It was as clear as anything. I saw it, but when I passed it I turned and saw its back and tail. The tail was very long, and the wolf was around hip height, I would say, and it was a grey-black colour." Rhea was quite sensibly not prepared to get out of the car to investigate what she'd seen, but she said, "I was a little concerned as to how I was going to get home and a bit freaked out driving in the pitch black. I know I'd seen a wolf. I cannot believe it, just slowly walked across the road into the woods. It wasn't a dog. There were no dog walkers about to suggest that it may even have been a dog." And then this week, Chris Howard from Yorkley in the Forest of Dean was walking along a path near Woodland, and he stopped in his tracks when he heard a stick snap in the darkness. He shone his torch towards where the sound came from and saw the wolf just 15 metres away. Despite being frightened by what he saw, he feels privileged at the encounter. However, he warns others who walk in the area to be cautious. "I shone my torch and I saw a wolf with its nose down to the ground, and then it looked at me." Mr. Howard instantly froze. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. But he described, "What I saw was 1,000,000% a wolf. It had a long snout, big head, and was well built from its neck to its rear end." I'm sure that some damn fool is going to claim that what we have here is a werewolf or something else particularly lycanthropic. But I think that what we're dealing with is a flesh and blood canid, but is it a wolf? Well, I've been interested in these stories for a long time, ever since. Okay, Archie, you can come up here. Come on, good boy. Come on. He has been fidgeting ever since I put him down on the floor at the end of his last bit on camera, but he wants to come up here while I describe what happens to wolves in Britain. And guess what? He's now jumped down again. I don't know who it was who said never work with children or animals, but I'm beginning to have sympathy with them. However, the wolf officially became extinct in the British Isles sometime around the 17th century. It's been claimed that they finally became extinct in Britain in 1648 and in Ireland about 50 years later, but so many places claim to be the site of the killing of the last wolf, I truly don't think that one can take any of these figures particularly seriously. However, ever since the wolf was extirpated, there have been occasional sightings of wolves in the wilder parts of our country. For example, the great Devon folklorist Theo Brown believed seriously that there were wolves in the northern part of Dartmoor, the part that is mostly only used these days by the Ministry of Defence for live firing exercises and for tanks. And there have been other sightings in other parts of the country, and that's not counting the one that was hit by a train, the one that was shot in Epping Forest and then spent many years in Epping Town Hall. I always mean to get Steve Ignorant to go and look into that one for me, but because he's the only person I really know with links to that area. But there isn't time to go into those now. Also, what I would like to tell you is that I think I have managed to contact the lady Rhea Seaward who saw the wolf last year, and I have written to her asking if we could have a chat on the show, and I'll let you know what happens, and I'll let you know all the other wolf stories that keep on coming in as and when they happen. So until then, please forgive me for leaving you all on tenterhooks.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, wants me to remind you, always press the notification bell. Otherwise you won't be told when there's a new show to watch. And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the end of another show. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a bit of a struggle for me at times, because my mental health's not been too good over the last few weeks. However, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found it educational, edifying, entertaining, and any other thing I can think up beginning with E. I've had several people ask recently why so-and-so isn't in the show at the moment. Well, if I can misquote a man called Pete Brown, I'm a very, very, very big fan of his. I've met him a couple of times. I've even interviewed him. If I can misquote Pete Brown, people may come and people may go, but the happy hour at the CFZ cocktail party goes on forever. Be seeing you.